Cornelia Parker's works derive from a variety of starting points: a garden shed, the Little Mermaid, Rodin's The Kiss, a sleeping Tilda Swinton, the Chancellor's red budget box, and the cracks in a pavement, to name but a few. Known for her explosive works which crossed the line between science and art, to mark the reopening of Manchester's Whitworth Gallery, she has created a new work which she describes as a Blakean pyrotechnic display in meteorite shower. I started by asking her where her inspiration comes from and how long an idea takes to develop.
I think I use the found object, and I'm quite drawn to things that are almost popular currency, really. So it's sort of almost like a well-worn path. So some things are quite cliched things I'm attracted to, and they might take years actually. I'll have an idea and I'll worry away at it, or it might be a little fragment of an idea, and then it will gradually build up and develop, and then I'll think, oh, I must use this object, like the budget box, for example, with all its damage done by politicians over the years, and it's been in and out of retirement. And I photographed it when it was retired at one point. And I did some microscopic portraits of the surface of the budget box. So I was just looking at the damage done by politicians, really, over its 150-year history. But then I like the idea that me holding it, allowing myself to be the chancellor for a brief moment, was something I quite like to do. So I think it was my first self-portrait, a self-portrait with budget box. And in this show, I've got some self-portraits, which are drawings in blood. So those are my second self-portraits.
You had some trouble getting the blood drawn for the purposes of...
Yes, my local GP practice, the doctor I went to see was horrified by the idea that I should use the blood for drawing, and I said, well, he said he wasn't going to give me a sample of my own blood. I said, but I've given many samples for scientific purposes and for medical purposes, but also I've given 7 pints of blood for other people to use. And I said, so if I was asking for it for science, would you give me some? It seemed science was fine, but art was not. But then luckily, Mancunian GPs are a little bit more robust, much more up for it. So, why not? It's your blood.
You just mentioned science and art and the distinction between the two. A lot of your works bring them together, and I just wondered, do you see them as distinct disciplines, or are they two sides of the same coin?
I don't really think of them as distinct disciplines. I think I perhaps don't even need to call myself an artist in a way. I mean, art is, I went to art school, but I'm interested in geography and history and geology and physics and chemistry, and I'm just curious, and I think we're all curious, and really it's just society that's sort of separating them out into specialisms, and really at the creative end of all of them, that we're all sort of cross-pollinating ideas, and that's what makes the whole thing move forward.
So you look more to the real world than to other artists in art history?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm inspired by other artists too, but I'm inspired by almost everything. And I realise that a lot of the most inspiring situations for me is when I'm having conversations with people not from my field, because I'm, taking out the comfort of art, the well-worn thing, and confronted with a different reality. And so that I find that a really creative situation.
Okay, on that note, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the work that you've made with the graphene, specifically for the Whitworth's reopening.
Well, one of the draws for me to do a show here is that it's part of the university, and I could get access to all the university departments and all the wonderful scientists and engineers and physicists and biologists that were there. And so graphene was something I was particularly interested in because I've been following its progress for the last 2 or 3 years, because it's derived from graphite, and graphite is a drawing material, so it has already links to art. That I thought, well, all the embedded energy in all these drawings, done by the old masters in graphite pencil, whether Kostya Novoselov, who is one of the wonderful duo that, Nobel Prize-winning duo that discovered graphene, if he could make some graphene from old master drawings. And he was really excited by the idea because he loves art, and he also interested in the history of graphite pencil. So he was very enthusiastic in saying, yes, I'd love to do this.
And were there any troubles with the conservators when you wanted to access reading Blake's drawings.
What's the great thing about the Whitworth being part of the university, and they have this wonderful collection of old master drawings, and the conservator obviously was breathing down Kostya's neck to make sure he didn't make off with a big lump of drawing, but there was always stray flakes on drawings of graphite. It's just, you know, they shed over the years, and they very often end up in the gutter of a notebook, or, you know, in the corner of the frame, and conservators usually remove them so that they don't do that. And so they were only allowed Kostya to remove the flakes that were loose, and, you know, they didn't only alter the drawing on a very molecular level. Kostya playfully said, "I quite like looking at the drawings through the microscope and wondering how I could make them look better."
So what happened then once you had this graphene? What have you done with it?
Well, I asked Kostya if it could be turned into some kind of switch, you know, if it, you know, because it has amazing supercapacitor properties, you know, it can relay energy. And he said he'd make sensor out of he took from several drawings, Constable Turner, Girton, Picasso, even took some graphite from Ernest Rutherford signature, you know, he'd done in pencil, the guy who split the atom in Manchester. So we have all this, you know, potential power in these little tiny specks. And he said he could make a sensor for me, which I said, well, what would trigger the sensor? How could you activate the energy? And he said, well, even a breath would do it. So I got very excited. I thought, oh, he said, because it changes the moisture content and it will, you know, make the material change. And I wanted to see if it could trigger a meteorite landing, because I'm doing this meteorite landing on Friday night to launch the museum, and it's going to be a Blakean-inspired firework display. And I thought if Kostya could breathe on this little speck of Blake and trigger the firework display, this breath of a physicist could, you know, contemporary visionary could trigger the latent energy of a past visionary. That would be exciting. And he said, I could do that, you know, I could breathe on this and it will trigger the firework display. So he's been working with the pyrotechnicists who are working the display, and so they've been tested tomorrow or on Friday. They're going to be spending the whole day just perfecting this, switching on and off to make sure that it happens on the night.
Are you worried at all about anything going wrong?
I'm worried about the wind, more about the high winds, because there's high winds forecast for Friday the 13th. But you know, I'm sure that where there's a will, there's a way.
And you say meteorite shower, is there actually some real meteorite
Yes,
involved?
there's a meteorite which I've bought from a meteorite dealer in America, and it's from Arizona, from the big Beringia crater, and it's iron, and I've had it ground up in the engineering department here, and it's going in the fireworks, and because it's iron, it will get expressed as light. It produces a light when it's burnt, you know, like other minerals, and so it will, you know, so the meteorite will rain down on Whitworth Park, triggered in a Blakean inspired fireworks display, and all, you know, caused by Kostya. You know, so a scientist breathes on art to make a meteorite land.
Amazing, bringing it all together again.
And also in the show here, I've got these bronze casts of cracks in the street, and there's one from Jerusalem here. So this is brand new for here. So I'm bringing Jerusalem to Manchester. So, and the other cast is from Blake's graveyard in London. So there's a Blakean sculpture, which is, you know, the path through Bun Hill Fields, and a street in East Jerusalem, occupied Jerusalem. So I bought the real Jerusalem here, you know, so there's, you know, Blake's utopic idea of Jerusalem and it being built on England's, you know, sort of the site of the Satanic Mills. So I think I like this idea of, you know, this new Jerusalem.
A lot of your works do seem to sort of tie things together and bring out links and relationships between
Yeah, and it's
items.
nice in this show, for example, having works from lots of different periods, because, you know, by juxtaposing works made at different times, I can trigger new associations. In the early gallery, there's a pair of embryo firearms, which I got from the Colt Firearm Factory in Connecticut. So they're interrupted guns. They're guns at the first stage of their production, given the finish they'd been would give to a finished gun. And then beside it is a kind of line of powder, which is a precipitated gun. So the engineers here have dissolved a gun in acid for me and made this precipitation. And so that's like a line of cocaine next to this embryo's gun. So it's guns in either end of their life, as it were. And the gun that's been precipitated is from a robbery. It's been confiscated by the police, precipitated by scientists for me to display as art.
You're quite involved with prison as well, aren't you? Talking of guns and robberies.
I'm trying to keep myself out of prison. But, yes, I've been working with prisoners on another project, doing embroideries for a sort of a piece for the Magna Carta, for the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. So I'm making a hand-embroidered facsimile of the Wikipedia page of the Magna Carta. And it's been made by lots of different people. So I'm working with prisoners and judges and MPs and barons. And so I really loved some of the embroideries that prisoners did. I like the backs of them particularly, you know, the more unconscious side of things. So I asked them to do some embroideries for the show, which I take two definitions from the dictionary and have them embroidered in reverse writing, face to face in the fabric. So the fabric gets the front of both meanings, but you get the back of one meaning and the front of another, but it's in reverse. So the meaning is, the two meanings are spliced together. And I think those relate very much to the themes of this show, like war and peace, love and hate, conscious and unconscious, near and far. So I think those embroideries, especially as the Whitworth's got a big textile department, and that's another thing that attracted me because I'm very interested in textiles. So I kind of, you know, Whitworth was a gun manufacturer. So some of the things I was already using in my work seemed very appropriate for this museum. So I brought them all together in this show.